All right, I think we're evening out. We might get a few more people joining in the next couple of minutes, but just in the sake of time, I think we'll get started. So welcome. My name is CJ Woodford. I am one of the co-chairs for the International Implementations Working Group as part of the GORC umbrella, as well as the GORC Interest Group. I'm joined by some of my other co-chairs. I don't know if you guys like to introduce yourselves quickly.
Hi, I'm
Yes,
Andrew
sure.
Trelaw, the Australian Research Data Commons.
I am Lautaro Matas from La Referencia, the Latin American Network of Open Science.
Yeah, and I am Javier López Albacete from the European Commission.
Nice, thanks, folks. Unfortunately, some of our other co-chairs, Mikiko Tenafuji and Lars Eklund, are not able to join today, one because of poor timing and the other because of concurrent sessions. Um, and I'm going to miss this, but I work for the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, or DRAC, or sometimes called the Alliance as well. Okay, so welcome to new RDA members. I feel like this always just does need to be said. The six guiding principles of RDA, we try to encapsulate that in our GORC groups as well. And so we're really excited for you to be here if you are new to the RDA, and thank you for coming to our session. That's really exciting. I'll start us off by talking through what we're going to cover today, kind of covering what do we mean by a global open research commons, touching on a little bit of previous work, and then takeaways from the RDA 23rd plenary, which was in Costa Rica late last year. So what we're hoping to cover today, I'll do the introductions. We're going to do some icebreakers, and it might seem weird to do the introduction before the icebreakers, but it's because we want you to have an idea of what this group is about so that you can really participate fully in those icebreakers. So you will get to the participation part. Well, it's just going to be a little later than normal. We're gonna showcase the GORC International Implementations Working Group work plan and then have some discussion on what that looks like. This is a very recently endorsed group. We got our endorsement in about mid-March. Our statement of work was something that we were working on right up until January. So there is some space for flexibility, and we want to hear what the community wants to do. Then we're going to move into some commons types discussion, which is our first deliverable, our first sub-deliverable even. You might notice the D1.1 there. We're going to talk about some task group sign up because we want the work to really start and move forward. This is our initial meeting for this working group, and then we'll close out with some conclusions and next steps. So what is the Global Open Research Commons, or what we've been calling GORC? At a very kind of high level or very simple level, it is frictionless access to research artifacts for researchers. And on a global level. And so the idea would be that researchers would have access to the research artifacts that they need to conduct research with the appropriate privacy and protocols in place anywhere at any time. And this is a level of interoperability that goes beyond individual commons or individual platform considerations into this global interconnection level. There was the GORC interest group. That was a place where folks would come together to kind of talk about what would this look like? How would we get to a global open research commons? And they tasked themselves with creating a roadmap of how would you get to the GORC. It was, I think, pretty early on realized that there's a lot more to just how would you get there. There's considerations for what is a commons, what would a GORC look like, and all of the pieces that go into that. And so there were GORC working groups created, the first of them being the International Model Working Group, to feed in some of these smaller pieces that would then fit into the roadmap and then go on into the GORC itself. So it seems like a two-step process, but there's lots of pieces in there. And as we now know, the International Model Working Group has actually been completed. We did create an international model, a set of non-prescriptive considerations that Commons can use to kind of figure out what they might need to then become part of the GORC, or a GORC eventually. And now we're moving on to international implementations, our current working group, as well as other groups within the GORC umbrella, like the Health Data Commons GORC Profile Working Group, which had a session to breakout one. We do have some outputs which are relevant to know about before we get started here. And so the very first one is the GORC interest group typology and definitions. So this includes a very, like a more specific definition of what a commons is, kind of the scope of the work that we cover in the GORC umbrella. And they also identified essential elements of a commons. And so what we kind of build on here is a commons would have something in each one of these essential elements. We have human or social elements in white, so that includes your governance structures and leadership, your engagement, your sustainability, not just financial, by the way, but other kinds of sustainability in terms of knowledge and this sort of thing as well. Your rules of participation and access, so definitions of who your community is, and human capacity. There's technical elements along the bottom in light blue. So that's your ICT infrastructure encompassing things like compute, storage, network, and our authorization and authentication infrastructure, your services and tools, and research objects. And both your human and technical aspects are pulled together as well as expanded externally through your standards and conventions, both formal and informal standards, essentially. So the reason why I introduced all of the essential elements is because they're going to be part of the icebreaker. So you don't have to keep them memorized, but they will be coming back. The GORC International Model Working Group, I've already introduced a little bit, but as I said, it is completed. We did actually have outputs on a recommendation, the first of which being this model. So this set of non-prescriptive considerations that a commons could develop or identify within their infrastructure they already have that enables them to become part of a GORC or the GORC. So really what leading towards this global interoperability pieces. It was built on top of the model, or it was built on top of the essential elements, such that the model has a set of categories and subcategories, as well as characteristics of each of those entities that more granularly define what is inside of each element. Not that it's a checklist, you don't have to do everything inside the model that's for each essential element, but it's a set of considerations, again, that commons may find some are more relevant and some aren't. The point is that you have something in everything, in all the essential elements. We also resubmitted this as a recommendation in 2024. So that's the new version of the model there. And these are accompanied by a narrative report. If you have not checked out the model before, I would strongly recommend looking at the narrative report first. It's a little bit easier to digest. And then going into the recommendation version 1.1 of the model. It is a very dense spreadsheet. And if we have time and if there is interest, I'm happy to showcase what that looks like as well. So the international model is complete. We focused in P23 on looking at the International Implementations Working Group, which is this new working group. And that's the case statement, or the statement of work, rather, as they're now called, that we wanted to submit for community review and get going on this next phase of GORC. So the very first thing, did we submit it? Yes, this is our very first meeting. We are endorsed. We did that. We wanted to coordinate with some groups that we knew had a large amount of overlap with, so the National Data Services Interest Group and the MALDRETH Working Group, to ensure that our timelines and our work plans would coalesce. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what those coordinations look like. But we did actually have some serious discussions with them. We've presented at both of their sessions in this plenary as well, and our statements of work line up. We've even got some additional publications with MALDRETH now that are open for viewing, and we can share them afterwards as well. I forgot to put them in the slides, my apologies. We also wanted to apply for RDA Tiger support because we realized from the International Model Working Group that this is a lot of work to keep on top of. And we did do that, and we got both of the grants that we applied for. So we have both the Cascade grant to help us with a web developer for making the model a little bit more interactive and accessible, as well as for support services. And we're very thankful to Ryan O'Connor, who's here in the meeting today, for assisting us as we get this particular working group up and running. So with that introduction, and I know it's a little bit of a fire hose, but we're going to move over into the Mentimeter, and I'm going to pass it over to Lotero for leading us in icebreakers.
Thank you, ZJ. Well, welcome everybody. We prepared this icebreaker session in order to know more about you and your interests, and what are your commons, what of the commons are interesting for you, and of course discuss about what the ways that you can collaborate and join to the group. So please, if you can enter in this URL and start answering the questions, we will jump to share the screen. Ryan, please. Thank you very much. Ryan is going to share the screen, and we will start to see the different. So first, we want to know what country do you live and or work in most of the time. I see that there are colleagues from different parts of the world. We have people from a lot of people from France. So welcome to everybody. I see that we have some people from Latin America also, Costa Rica. Australia, United States. Okay, maybe we can move to the next question, Ryan. So here you can enter the role of your organization, and please note that you can pick more than one role until 3 years, I think, right, Ryan?
Yep.
So we are looking for knowing more about you and what kind of role do you do for your organization. So we have people from data steward, project run managers, organizational senior, professional researchers. Okay. Most of people are program run managers and people related with data steward, right? Okay, TJ, I don't know if you want to make some analysis about this, or Ryan. What you find something interesting to note? I'm pretty new to this meeting, so I don't know if this is the usual audience for of we have new people coming.
So interesting that we don't have any research infrastructure developers in this session.
No students on either. Thank you, Andrew. Well, we can jump to the next one. So what part here we want to know what parts of the common that I don't know if you are new to this, you saw the brief presentation that TJ did in the beginning, but in this part we are interested in know what parts of the common are related to your role in your organizations. Okay, we have people from governance. Is very well balanced. No winners so far. Okay, it's not easy to. So service and tools, standards and conventions, and governance.
I think next time if we run this poll, we should have one of the options should be all of them, which is what I ended up ticking.
Yeah.
Because I suspect there are some people for whom the answer is all of them rather than particular ones.
Yeah. We can jump to the next, Ryan, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what of those commons are interested in working on learning about or applying to your organization? Here we want to know, because we are looking for help also for you to join and participate in the groups. So we would like to know which ones are more interested for you. And maybe looking at the result that we just had, you can, even if you think that you are interested in all of them or a lot, please pick one or two in order to have more. Okay, service and tools. Standards again. Okay, service and tools, standards and convention. Now we have more information about sustainability research options. Okay. So we have some information in order to discuss and see what are your I see that you're mostly interested in service and tools, and we will move to the next part now, I think. So what areas of future work are you interested in? There is a question in the chat about the way to capture the Mentimeter results in the shared notes. We will share that, right?
Yeah, well, I'll have access to the responses. They're like anonymous responses. I will, while the meeting is going on, I will check if I will have that information available straight away. Yeah, I can investigate that one once. I think this is either the last or the penultimate question. But yeah, I'll see if I can add that to the notes.
Yeah, Ryan, I think probably just if you can capture the graphs
Oh
for
yeah,
each of
yeah.
the questions, that would be enough. I don't think we need anything more granular than that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can do that. No problem.
So we have people interested mainly in creation of common and specific implementation of the profiles, in value narratives and user documentation, and mapping and crosswalks with other models and frameworks, right? And it's more or less what, I don't know, guys, but it's more or less what we saw in other sessions, right? And even in my case and in the region, we are interested in creating common specific implementation and mapping to existing models. Okay, thank you, Ryan. I think that we can move.
Oh, that is it.
We will share the results. I don't know. I invite the other co-chairs to comment on what we saw and give a few some analysis and for the next part.
And that's great. So thank.
No, I was going to say that I think we saw quite a good variety of profiles and interests, which is quite good.
Yeah. In addition to the results being put on the collaborative notes, you can also, when you get to the end of your Menti, there'll be like a little view results when you answered the last question, and it'll bring you to something like this. So everyone can see it, and I feel like this link that could be shared maybe, but we'll definitely add them to the collaborative notes regardless. So it'll be visible for everyone.
Yes, and looking at the countries, I see that we still have more people from the States and North America and Europe, some people from Japan, and a few people of some countries of Latin America. No one from Africa. If I please return to. We don't have people from Africa. Okay, so mostly from Europe and North America, right? We need to work on that.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments on the Menti?
No, from my part.
No? Okay. Great. So that was really helpful. And certainly so if you haven't guessed it already, and those that might not have looked at our statement of work or haven't been involved with the GORC groups before, you may not have realized, but that very last question on the areas that we're asking, what are you interested in working on? They're actually for task groups in this working group. So we're going to be covering that more towards the end to see, because we now know that there's 3 that you're interested in. We're going to try and get you to sign up for them. But what are the areas of work in the first place? And let's explain them a little bit more. So as we talked about, the GORC International Implementations Working Group is endorsed now. Our statement of work has gone through, and I just want to cover very quickly some of the deliverables that we have in there so that we're all on the same page. This is not to say that the deliverables in the International Implementation Working Group or GORC II are the only ones we're interested in. We know very well that the GORC groups are going to need to continue because there is a lot of work. So keep in mind that there's going to be future groups to work on other pieces as well. But we know that our first deliverable, we want to look at implementations of the model. So we're going to look at types of commons, which is what our main deliverable from today. We are going to work with the National Data Services Interest Group to create a commons profile, or rather a class of commons profiles. And we want to look at profiles of existing commons to kind of say, what is the implementation of items in the model for specific instances? Finding a link that will actually bring you to an example of what something looks like in the model concretely. Our second main deliverable is improved navigation and use, which will come through via format improvements, like introducing identifiers to the items so they're not just living as individual cells in spreadsheets. We want to introduce semantic objects. Some work has already been done on that already, and we are working on an interactive web interface so that it's not just in a spreadsheet. And as we had mentioned before, we did receive the RDA Tiger Cascade grant to help us with that work. So that's actually in process right now at NVIS. We're moving that up already. We want to improve our model documentation and communicating the value narratives of the model. So why and how do you use it? We want to look at model slices, which was not a very popular option in the icebreaker, but this idea of identifying what enables FAIR across all of the elements, what enables research data management across all the elements, and various other thematic slices, like how many of the items actually relate to a PID strategy, for example, would be a thematic subslice. So there's interest there. And then, of course, a very popular one, which was model mapping and connections to existing frameworks, models, vocabularies, and principles, which is work that we have already started as well, and is where it links with our friends in the Muldrith working group, the Muldrith II working group in particular. And the last one is going to be updated and expanded literature analysis, because the space of digital research infrastructure and research commons and all of the other platforms and services that kind of fit in under there, it continues to grow, right? There's all kinds of new stuff that comes out all the time, and we want to make sure that we're keeping an accurate view of the community. So the main outcomes here are going to be providing a common language to the commons through the international model. That's mostly through D2 and 3. We want to provide examples of what a commons can look like using the model as a structure to communicate that, which is largely through the first deliverable, and then showcasing where existing frameworks come together so that we're not always, it's not a competition of which model and which framework you're using. We want to try and make a cohesive community web, if you will, of when is it relevant to use which model, depending on your role and perspective that you're taking. We really want to show how the models fit together and complement each other as opposed to being in competition, because that's really what we've been finding is not the case. It's more like different models have different strengths and weaknesses. And that's really where D4 comes in. All right, and so to kind of illustrate where some of these deliverables come in and how they can kind of be expanded upon, Javier is going to cover an example that was provided by our co-chair, Mikiko.
Yeah, thank you, CJ. So, yeah, CJ has explained what are the strands of work that we foresee or we plan for the next round of the working group. But especially for those of you that are not very familiar with what the model is or what are the nitty-gritty details inside it, we thought it would be good to put a concrete example of how all these improvements and this increased usability and making it more easier to understand the model can be put in practice using one concrete example. So it was my co-chair Mikiko that proposed this, and I will try to explain with my own words. I hope I got the right understanding, but she brought up this one particular example. She said, well, lately there is more and more interest in tracking and monitoring open science practices. Open science refers, well, to sharing publications, but not only, other kind of research outputs as well. It could be data, it could be software, and so on. And in particular, this is natural because there's been a lot of push for putting in place open science policies and practices. And then, of course, as a follow-up, you want to know how things are going, how much the uptake is, what is the volume of these open science practices, and how effective your policies are. So many countries are putting in place, well, not only countries, also individual institutions, but this is typically a nationwide effort. Systems to monitor open science. How many publications are shared? How many are open access? How many are closed? What is the reuse, etc., etc. Okay, and apparently, and this I take from Mikiko, that in Japan, this is one of the places where they are thinking of putting one such observatory for open science in place. Now, when you try to do that, and well, you face a number of difficulties, that we think that the further evolution of the GORC model can help. And this is, I'm trying to follow her logic here because she unfortunately cannot be with us. But first of all, by developing further implementation of the models, and for instance, I refer here to the slices that CJ were saying that they were not so popular. You may want to have, because sorry, I would like to make one remark first. When you need to carry out this kind of a study, you have to aggregate and collect information from many different sources. Sources here in the general term, repositories or commons in the most general term, many different kind of sources. And then you face the problem of fragmentation. Each of them may have each of these individual sources or repositories, university, institutional, thematic, whatever. They may have different technical capacities, they may have different kind of data sources, and they may have very different methods of tracking, accounting, and monitoring. So by creating profiles or slices, which in this particular case would be addressed, and this is only an example, we don't necessarily have to work on this, by creating slices that allow clear benchmarking of the different capacities. It's not only about technical capacities, because it's also about policies, and that is the beauty of the work, that it's all encompassing. It's not only about ICT, but you need to know what is your strategy for engaging with your community, what kind of access policies you have, all these kind of things. So this slicing or profiling of the model, in this case, along this particular need of tracking or better understanding the uptake and use of your objects can be very useful. So this is a potential direction of work. Then, of course, the improved navigation of the model would facilitate that, and that would allow a much easier comparison of different, well, data schemas and well, many other different elements that are crucial for interoperability, which is one of the essential elements, by the way. And then, of course, even if you do all that, that allows a much easier benchmarking and collection of data. You unavoidably need to update and expand your model continuously, because we don't live, like CJ was saying, as an isolated cell, but there are frameworks, for instance, for evaluating the research assessment, like the COARA, that they may not be doing this work, but they may be the natural users of this work. You want to understand how open science is tracked, because then you want to fit that into another part of the research cycle. In this case, research assessments. You may need to continuously evolve and update what you are doing, and how your commons is delivering for that. And that applies to this particular example, but to many others as well. Okay, so that's essentially it for me. I think it's a cute example because it cut across many important elements of the model itself, and it has a lot of potential usability afterwards. But this is just one example of what I would think would qualify as a model slicing, most likely. But it can be also, I mean, along many other directions. It can be thematics, or I'm talking about the profiling here. So this is the kind of a deep dive that we would like to do in this next iteration of the work group in different dimensions. And these dimensions are essentially for you, for the community, to propose. This is just a teaser, so to say. We don't necessarily have to work on this. Okay, I hope I didn't misrepresent Mikiko's views on this, and I give it back to you, CJ.
Yeah, no, that was an excellent description, I think. So thank you, Javier, for picking that up. And what we'd like to do from here with this kind of example, and then also like kind of an introduction to what the areas of work are that we want to do next. I want to introduce the task groups themselves and then open it up for discussion on, are there other areas that we want to tackle? Is there something that's not clear that we need to make more clear, that sort of thing. So the task group structure is to kind of tackle this work. We want to have so we got two things. We have a task group and we got task forces. Task groups are within the GORC International Implementations Working Group. Task forces are going to be across groups. So we know that we want to have a task force with the National Data Service interest group. We know that we want to create a profile of the GORC for that class of commons. We know that we want to have a implementation specific profile task group. So looking at individual commons and then creating profiles for them with specific instances. We know we want to have a model container task group. So looking at those semantic objects and identifiers and really working with the web developer at NBIS that's creating the interactive web interface. We know we want to do model documentation, so creating value narratives and writing that documentation that will eventually be hosted actually in that interactive web interface, but kind of helping explain two different roles, two different areas of the community, why the GORC model is helpful and how they can use it. We do want to have a model slices task group, even though that was less popular in the icebreakers, and to look at how can the different elements come together to address specific concerns, such as the open science metrics that were shown before, but then other things as well. And of course, model mappings, but mappings is a general term here. We also mean connections and identifying where models fit together. And then lastly, part of model mappings, and this might be up for discussion on, is it the one task group that does both? But we know that we're really keen on working with MALDRETH 2 to identify the connection between the GORC model and the MALDRETH model. We have some preliminary mapping already, and we know that they can be used in complement. So we really want to investigate how. So we've got 5 task groups and 2 task forces. And we're planning to have monthly working group meetings to review the intermediate outputs from these task groups and task forces. They're not going to be working in silos. We are planning to have a lot of interconnection, but how they work is actually going to be part of our discussion today. And that's going to be up to the people that actually join the task groups. So we'd like to open it to the floor now and kind of say, does this structure make sense? Do these targets make sense? General comments, worry about scope, clarification, and then I've got a suggestion here for the working group meetings, but really anything about the intention of the International Implementations Working Group so far. I unfortunately can't look at the chat while sharing, so if there is stuff happening in the chat, you might have to voice it.
Yes, I am.
So CJ, Chris from Invest in Open has asked, can you repeat the difference between task group and task force again?
Yeah, so we might ditch the difference, but essentially it was to say a task group is within the International Implementations Working Group. So it's a task group of GORC 2 members that are working on GORC 2 stuff. The task forces are intended to be between groups. So between the GORC 2 group and MALDRETH 2, or between the GORC 2 and NDS interest group. And that's saying that there needs to be members from 2 different groups in the RDA working towards a common deliverable. So we were trying to make that distinction between a cross group and an internal group. Open to suggestions on how we might call them otherwise.
Francoise has been so inspired by that description, CJ, that she's asking where we can sign up.
I've just put the link into the chat, Francois, under your point. Yeah, CJ has it on screen here, so yeah, that's the.
That's why my complicated sharing was useful. I could do it all at the same time. So yeah, so in the collaborative notes, if you like using the navigation pang, you can do that. But if you just scroll all the way to the bottom, this is essentially where it is. We've got a very short description of each of the task groups and the 2 task forces. Again, the naming of these things isn't really all that relevant. It's just a way for us to make a distinction right now. And we've got places for you to sign up. So the idea would be you'd add your name and your email, and then you would just tell us which task group you'd want. So for example, you might type TG1 in here if you really want to work on creating individual commons profiles, or you might say, I really want to be in the NDSIG TF. So you might put that in there too. For example, if you really want to work on profiles, you might do that. And I'll take that out of there because I see people filling it out. I don't want you to feel self-conscious by me sharing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you would go to sign up. Just be clear, and you can sign up for more than one. I will highlight that in the slides, if you have them open, you might also see a timeline slide that we didn't share just for the sake of conciseness, but we don't plan for all the task groups and task forces to be operating simultaneously throughout the entire life of the working group, right? For the whole 18 months, we don't plan to have 7 groups within the group that we need to manage. It is kind of intended that some are going to have more activity at certain times and then less activity at other times, depending also with the how NDS and Waldrith work too. Francois.
Yes, thank you. I have not forgotten the example I provided about our astronomical, let's say, commons, which develops the standards. Where would you put it? These kind of things among the task groups.
So for the IVOA, that would be TG1. That would be a common specific profile.
Okay, so it's thematic profile, something like a profile, an example of thematic commons.
Yeah. So that's actually a really good point. We've been using the word thematic to describe a couple of different things. So if you wanted to create a profile of the IVOA, which is one of the very first things we want to do in TG1, by the way, because you were part of our speaker series, and therefore the IVOA was part of our analysis in the international model working group. We want that we would call that a commons profile, but the type of commons IVOA is thematic. So there's a distinction there between a profile of a thematic commons, which is still a commons profile, versus the thematic slicing of the model, which is where we get into this like making connections between essential elements. Thematic slicing will still probably be relevant to thematic commons, but yeah, there are two different ideas there for sure.
Okay, CJ, I have to confess it's too late at night for me to have understood that. So maybe we need to
Oh
have another
no.
go at coming up with a better written description for it. Just
Okay.
because you can't see chat, just jumping back a little bit in the discussion about task groups versus task forces, Volmar Newberg Orchestram has suggested that perhaps we might change task force to liaison group, which I think is clearer. But
Love
that's
it.
something we can consider. Yeah.
I am not sure. Sorry. I am not sure about that, if I may say something, because
Go ahead.
a liaison is good, but the idea is to do something, to work. So liaison
Okay.
is a bit too, well, how may I put it in English? You can find the word for me.
It's like almost like supervisory or high level. It's like sharing information as opposed to co-creation of
Too,
information.
too fuzzy.
Too fuzzy.
Okay.
That's good.
Sorry, Volmar.
If I may poke, well, there is a hand raised by Chris. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Okay, maybe I should come off of hi. Hello, there's a face behind the hand. I am new to I am new to RDA.
Welcome.
And so thank you. I appreciate all of the work that's been put into this so far. Clearly, there's been a lot of thought, but for someone who's brand new to this, I am a little bit overwhelmed. And I don't know what any of the things on the slide, the task groups and task forces, actually entail. So, is there maybe a place where I can go after this meeting to read a little summary that will allow me to better understand what each of these groups is going to be is meant to work on, so that I know where I can best contribute
Yeah.
and be helpful.
Sure. I'd like to react. Thank you, Chris, and welcome to RDA. You'll see this is a very good place to be. Beyond the definitions, I mean, the of task group and task forces, now CJ will fill all the details in. At the end of the day, what we are looking is simply for people that are interested in these topics and want to discuss and work around together to share experiences and to build something together. Building in this particular context is to see how we can take this very broad model that has been quite well accepted or successful to date. I don't know if you have had the chance to look into the details of the model. Provides a template, a very broad description of all the essential elements in the commons, what different kind of things you may find inside each of them. And this is supposed to be a reference or a tool or an organizing principle for common developers to reflect or to plan the development of commons. So at present, we are at a relatively high, well, the model is quite concrete, but it's very broad. So now we would like to make it more usable, closer to the ground and improve the applicability. So that is the idea of profiling, of creating thematics or slices, you know, and also from the point of view of the user who is looking at it. This is a infrastructure manager, is it the product developer, is it an end researcher? So we would like to make it more adaptable and more usable. And then for more impactful, that is at the end of the day, the whole idea. And for that, we need the expertise of the people that are actually related to it from one angle or perspective or another. So these task groups are, or forces, CJ will correct me now, relatively informal voluntary work where we get around different topics and we discuss together and we come and we do some work together because we need to do a profile or an evolution of the model or improve the container and these kind of things. So I just want to make some things as simple or go to the essence. This is just for us to discuss and work together in a very informal setting and based on voluntary and curiosity and interest-driven approach to the problem. Now, how we get together, I will comment on that later. How the work is organized, well, we are quite flexible. We are people all around the globe. We all have other jobs to do. And okay, so we will find a way to meet with some regularity, to define a format, something that suits the needs of the people that actually want to work together. But the important thing is that having the interest in seeing the value on what we are doing and wanting to contribute to it from your perspective, whichever one it is. Sorry if I made it too long, but I felt that we are getting a bit too much into fine details of the formalities and so on, maybe losing a little bit the big picture of what we are trying to do here. Sorry. And now CJ will fill all the dots and actually reply to your question.
No, that's great, Javier. And Chris, just to touch on one other piece on like what are some of the definitions for the task groups themselves and what were they actually going to be working on? So everything Javier said, and then where can you find a little bit more detail about what the actual pieces of work will be or what we're thinking they might be? Because there's also this aspect of the task group members have a very much control and ownership over what the direction it goes in. Us as the co-chairs, we're trying to provide some seeding ideas and then you run with it, right? But in the statement of work that we have, which is linked in the collaborative notes up at the top, and we can put it in the chat as well. But in here, if you're looking for specifically what we're planning to do in the work plan, which is a classic part of the statement of work, it goes into a little more detail of the deliverables, but I'd point your attention to the second piece in the work plan, which actually gets into specifically each individual task group, what deliverable they're aiming for, their objective, the existing work that they're going to be able to work on that we already have for you to take up, and then the connections with the other intermediate outputs as well. So there's a lot more detail in the statement of work for each individual task force and task group. But the short pieces are certainly in the slide deck and elsewhere. But if you wanted to say a little bit more about what was our actual intention, the objective for each task group is right in here in the statement of work, in the work plan. Ryan.
Yeah, just I'm not going to expand on the aims or objectives or anything on of the task forces, but I just wanted to add, at the risk of inviting more work on myself, I'll be able to help out with the some of the practical aspects of setting up if the task forces or groups require sort of, which I'm sure they will require, regular meetings or just some sort of kind of help with documentation, or even just kind of in the task forces or forces, I think, whichever one is dealing with liaising with the other groups. I'll be able to sort of act as the help with that, sort of facilitate those discussions and that sort of act as the intermediary there if necessary as well. So there is organizational support available from me and from my colleagues at Tiger as well.
All right, we've got a few hands. I think Andrews was up first.
Okay, thanks. So Chris, just scrolling back in the chat a little bit. Firstly, no need to apologize for the questions. It's great to have questions. We would much rather have questions than silence. And you're right, there is a somewhat overwhelming amount of stuff there, both in the underlying model and in the more detailed work that we're now proposing to do. So I think CJ's pointing to the statement of work's a really good place to start for some of the detail of what the task groups and task forces might work on. In terms of your question about the honeycomb diagram, the essential elements or the hexagons or whatever we're calling it, and we call it all of those things, I think there are two streams of activity. So one is we're looking at the essential elements and slowly refining them over time and trying to work out, is anything missing? Are we capturing things in the right way? But that's changing on a relatively slow timescale, if I can put it like that. The bulk of the intellectual work has already gone into that. The activity now, as Javier said, is okay, great. So what does that mean? How does that help me if I'm building a commons? And so that's why we're emphasizing in this particular session the need for the work to happen in those various task groups and task forces as we seek to flesh out how does that help implementers, how does it help policymakers, how does it help builders, how does it help me if I'm building a commons from scratch. So yeah, that hopefully provides a little bit more context. If you want more help, feel free to email any of the co-chairs. I'll put my email address is in the table at the top. I'm very happy to have a follow-up Zoom meeting if that would be useful.
Thank you.
I think Latero's hand was next.
Yes, thank you. Well, welcome, Chris. And I noted that you work for IOI, and I know the excellent work that you're doing with the InfraFinder. And in that sense, I think that the GORC model could be very useful for the work that you are doing, for making profiles and also classifying the commons that you are collecting and in the context of the regional funding that you're launching. So you are very welcome to join to the groups and work together. I know that it's a lot of information, even I'm still learning. So you are welcome to join and ask all the questions that you need. Please feel free to contact me for anything.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I think the last hand up right now is Francois.
Yes, I would like to go back for a minute to the semantic question about how to name a task force. I think Volmar was fully right to say that we have to convey the liaison aspect. So it's also a question to the National Data Service co-chairs who are around the screen now. Can this task force be called, for instance, GORC/NDS task force? So that it's a common endeavor.
Sure. I mean, that suggestion has the advantage that it's in the right alphabetical sequence. It's GORC and then NDS, so G before N, and it has GORC first, so that works for me.
I'm fine with.
My NDS co-chairs may disown me for having said that, but never mind.
No, I agree. It's okay. You've got 2/3 of us now.
Excellent. Big win.
All right, well then for folks that are signing up in the collaborative notes, feel free to update that. I think also this point on what the task forces are called in particular, where they are in collaboration with more than one group, I think it's totally fine for whatever the groups decide. It doesn't even need to be the same between the National Data Services or GORC/NDS and then potentially GORC / Maldra. That doesn't have to be the same between them. As long as everyone's happy, then that's what matters. Considering how our conversation has gone so far, though, I think I might suggest changing up the order of the presentation. We were planning to talk more about task groups at the end of the session and kind of leave with this encouragement to sign up. But because we've already done a lot of that, Javier, how do you feel about me skipping to your last couple of slides that you were going to lead on this task group discussion, and we'll just do that now?
Yeah, sure.
We're already here, and then if we have time, we'll come back and talk about the oh
24, I think.
this one.
Yeah,
Is that it?
right.
Oh yeah. Okay, we're good.
No, so yeah, CJ is right, because the discussion has gone into the direction of who does what, and actually that was our closing message to you. We were going to make a call for contributions to work in these different strands of work foreseen for the working group 2. And yeah, we need your help and knowledge. My reflection is that the original or the last version of the international model has been quite successful. We have several adoption stories, and it's gaining traction in the community, and I think it's a quite good piece of work. And the reason why it is a good piece of work is because we managed to enjoy and to use the expertise and the knowledge and the work of many people that contributed to it. I don't remember the numbers, CJ, probably you do, but there were over 50 people, right? I think contributing to different task groups or task forces. I don't remember how they were called back in the day, but we had many different people that work and discuss a lot, and they were quite varied in their profiles. There were policymakers, there were managers, there were data specialists, data stewards, and all together we managed to come with a quite useful thing for the community, which is the GORC International Model. I think that to bring the GORC model to the next level, where we aim to bring it through this second iteration of the working group, we really need the similar kind of expertise that we were lucky to have in the first round. Okay, so this is just to say again that this is an open call for contributions to the work ahead. We need your help and your knowledge. And like I said, going back to the question of what is what and how things are organized, okay, I think we are quite flexible about it. We have proposed some ideas, the task groups, the task forces, some preliminary headings or titles for each of them. But at the end of the day, the ownership of the work and of the working modalities are to those that are actually making the work. So, I mean, we propose flexibility to adapt the scope, the structure, and the particular direction of work within the different groups or subgroups to the expressions of interest that we receive, to those of you that decide joining. Then at the same time, if you are maybe a little bit scared that always joining one of these groups comes with some, well, of course, it will require some time and dedication from your part, but we hope it will be something enjoyable. I have very good memories of my participation in when we were starting to build the GORC International Model with CJ and Hans. We had very passionate and, to me, informative discussions. So we hope there is an element of pleasure, but of course there is some time and dedication. And to alleviate the overheads, on one hand, we count with the excellent support from RDA Tiger project, and they support horizontally across many different aspects, from the logistics ones, but also in landscaping, in reporting, in disseminating, in liaising with the other task groups. So all these kind of things that you may not be so much interested in, we have support for that. And then, of course, you also have support from the co-chairs, where we just provide some light steering. We have to make sure that the different strands of work are coherent with each other, that there are not obvious duplications or divergences, but I mean, the idea is simply to support, we will also contribute to the different task groups and help you in getting it done. Okay, so yeah, this is our call to the community. There are 30 participants in this meeting, as far as I can see. Now in Zoom, we need all of you plus at least another 20 or 25 to match the numbers of the first round. Is that correct, CJ? Yes, 50. Well, let's say 50. So if you're interested, you can sign up or indicate interest in the rolling notes, including any comments or suggestions. What is the particular topic, subtopic, or how you think you could contribute, or what would you like to see as an outcome of the work? So indicating a bit direction. Feel free to make your expression of interest as openly as you want, with no strings attached at this point. We are simply collecting interest. And also, it would be extremely useful if you share this call for contributors with your colleagues and to get and helping us getting the experts on board for this work. Again, so that's it. I think, and going back to the previous slot in this session, that maybe we need to discuss a little bit more. This is an initial proposal of what we want to do. This is in the case statement for the working group. It has been endorsed. So we have some general ideas, but again, I insist that there is still flexibility on openness to further discuss and to tailor the work ahead, not only to your interest, but also to the to the interest of the broader community to make something impactful. So there is room for that. So please, you are all invited. You are all welcome, no matter whether you are an expert or not. I mean, I am a policy maker. That is how I would define myself, or that is my current job. And I got myself engaged in quite technical discussions back in the days, and it was fun. I mean, I learned a lot. So please, I hope that you find interest in this. And I don't know what else to say to advertise this. I'm doing my best, but it's fun. I mean, it's fun. Maybe we should think of some ways of disseminating this call for contributions beyond this session. Probably we will need to do that, but if you can spread the word a little bit, that's already a lot of help. And yeah, okay, that's essentially what I wanted to say. I give the floor back to you, unless there are any reactions or questions or. Again, the working modalities and the precise details on how the work is going to be arranged can only be defined once we know who we have on board, what their interests are, also what their availability is. We understand that some people are not available all the time. We all have, so to say, main jobs. And for different reasons, you can contribute only in a given period, then maybe you are busy with other things, then you come back to it. So we propose a quite flexible approach to organizing the work. So this is not a burden on you or a responsibility you cannot take up, but something where you actually contribute and have fun when you can. That is the general idea. Then of course we need to make some agreements, but first we need the interest and the people and the experts on, and then we'll arrange things. And I think I have already said that a few times, but I think it's important to recall it. So I give it back to you, CJ.
No, that's great. Thank you, Javier. And I won't pressure people by switching over to the collaborative notes again, but please definitely express your interest there. That's what we'll take as like the first group of people that are interested, and then we'll start snowballing from there. The groups won't necessarily hit the ground running in May. We do want to start like feeling out what the interest is from the community in May and start maybe having some first task group meetings, which will be facilitated by RDA Tiger. But in addition to our working group meetings, which we are planning for them to start in May, I think we're going to go with our way that we had it in the International Model Working Group, where it was the fourth Thursday of the month, and we alternated month to month from 1300 UTC to 2300 UTC. I had a question here in like whether we should start in the afternoon or in the late night for UTC, because just in case we didn't have enough discussion, but we can make that call at the co-chairs level. I think we'll we'll avoid that fight between Australia and Europe right now. Chris.
Hi. I think I just realized part of my part of my like, oh my God, how do I fit myself in here? Which is can you help me understand why this group GORC? I mean, I love what I'm seeing, but I'm trying to understand like why it was created and what is the high level goal.
Yeah, no, those are really good questions. So the high level goal is to have interoperability globally across borders for these research platforms for researchers. So it would be the interconnection of research commons across borders so that researchers can access the research artifacts they need to do the work they need to do with the services to do that work. So not to say that you're not going to have any security or privacy protocols, or that, you know, personal information data will be openly available or anything along those lines. It's mostly saying that we want to have better interoperability between research services and the availability of objects, so that researchers are not continuously met with these barriers to do their work. This goes across disciplines. It goes across different areas of infrastructure. But I also see if Andrew or Javier in particular have other ideas where they've been interest group co-chairs for the longest. And this was actually started with the interest group, which was trying to answer this question.
So CJ, I think that's a very good overview. The original driver was interoperability, and as Natalie has noted in the chat, you could expand that as being, you know, the support for research, the infrastructures and the standards and the things that help researchers do their work match the global nature of research and scientific discovery. Having said that, if I can put it as one of the co-chairs of the original interest group, it's taken us a while to get to interoperability, by which I mean that we've been doing a lot of necessary work that is now and giving us the foundation to start thinking about the interoperability piece. So the desire, the reason for the original hexagon was, how do we talk about what a commons is and what the elements of a commons are? And then the international model was, well, let's try and apply that to existing practice. What can we learn from what people are doing, and how can we extract from the existing commons that we see implementation patterns that we can perhaps codify? And so the international model thing that's currently what I lovingly refer to as the spreadsheet from hell, and is going to be made beautiful by the work of the team that Lars Eklund at NBIS is leading. That was trying to map out all of the different ways that you might want to build a commons. And what we're now turning our attention to is, okay, now that we have a better sense of the landscape, how do we start thinking about interoperability between commons? And that is absolutely going to be one of the foci for the work over the next year and a half.
Yeah, I would simply add to the very good explanations by CJ and Andrew that, of course, we are seeking for interoperability, but interoperability is not an end on itself. It's a means for cooperation. At the end of the day, what we want to do is to enable cooperation between researchers and users so that they can share actually research outputs, tools, and knowledge. And the problem that we face at the very beginning is there is a lot of fragmentation, people doing things very differently, that they are not compatible or not interoperable with each other. And that is a problem. So this is a way of it's an enabler for scientific and research cooperation, I would say. That is the big goal, at least in my understanding. But of course, to get there, you have to go to the nitty-gritty details of how things are done. We started by the model that provides a general template of all the essential ingredients, and now we want to make it a bit more actionable in the ground, and thereby fostering complementarity and coherence in between the different efforts for commons development.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, great. And I do see that the chat is doing something, but I don't know if there's any other points that were messaged that need to be said out loud before we move on.
We are trying to share, different people are sharing different explanation on for
Nice.
what GORC is. So Chris, take a look. We are all trying to collaborate with explaining from our different perspectives what GORC is useful.
Different perspectives on the elephant.
Right.
I love that. And that kind of, I guess, also feeds back into this idea of value narratives. We know that we're going to need more than one. There's going to be lots of different roles and different kinds of organizations. And that's kind of actually a good segue into the point that we wanted to cover in the last little bit here, now that we've really talked about our task groups and the intention of the working group as it moves forward. So as part of identifying and making these profiles, which will help Commons to see what each other is doing and then essentially help with that implementation of items in the GORC, which then leads to this interoperability between infrastructures, we wanted to figure out a way of actually identifying what commons are, the different types they might be. This is work that was done in the International Model Working Group. It was done primarily by me because I was a full-time research associate at the time on this work. It has not been vetted by the speakers. It has not been vetted by the working group. This is, again, this plenary, because it's been shown in a couple of other sessions so far, but this is new work, and we want to have this set first before we really dive into profiles and other things, because we'd like to use this as a structure to say, if you're a commons of this type, these are the things that are really relevant for you. Or as a starting point, we might say that, because of course, all of these are considerations that are flexible. So I'm going to talk quickly about how I identified them, how they were identified in the International Model Working Group speaker series. Again, that has been vetted by the analysis has not been vetted by the speakers. That's going to be part of the profiling work, is figuring out if their type was correct. And then I'd like to open it up into discussions. And as I'm talking, because I am going to be introducing the definition of the dimensions and the types first, if you have notes or you have ideas, please put them in the chat, but then also in the collaborative notes, and I'll go over there and show you what I mean. There's a table down here. Oh goodness, okay, I'm gonna have to open the navigation screen again. Comments types, there's a table down here where we're encouraging you to add stuff either as actual comments, like in the Google Drive. For example, you might add a comment, or in the table cells themselves. But I really want to have it as discussion. It's just, I know there's going to be a lot of content to get through first. That's all. Okay, so these dimensions, how are they identified? We had a questionnaire that went out to each speaker as part of the speaker series. And the dimensions that kind of came out of some of these specific questions were what I used to create this analysis. And so what the Commons provides. And so thinking about the IVOA and Francois's comment earlier about creating standards, it was like, do you only do standards? Do you only do research objects? Do you include software? Do you include high performance computing? Do you have discovery layers? This kind of question. So what do you do when it began and their own self-determined stage of maturity, which was kind of like a weird dichotomy sometimes of how long it actually existed versus how they felt their maturity was. Who their audience was, or who their intended audience was. So that was both discipline specific or thematic, but it could also be the general public, it could be researchers, government, and so on and so forth. Why the Commons existed, so a little bit around their mandate, what the priorities were, and how users found the Commons. So that kind of included their engagement with their community and kind of almost like their self-promotion. And also their partners. So where were they available? Were they available through the research institutions themselves and this sort of thing? So these were kind of the questions that I used to define the dimensions. So I'm going to go through each one. The first one was maturity. This is a discrete dimension where you need to choose one individual item or one individual value, and it refers to the actual and perceived age of the commons. So you can have a young commons. So I've typically considered this to be less than 5 years old. You're developing your core services on your platforms. Maybe you don't even have them up yet, or maybe you only have one up, that kind of thing. Middle-aged would typically be between 5 and 15 years old. You have established core services, you have an established researcher base, but you have a lot of things that you have left to develop, or you know that you want to expand to your full intended community. And then mature would be more than 15 years old typically, and you have a very comfortable community. You have very well-established services that researchers or your community members know that they can go to and trust. You might still be looking to improve or expand, but you've really got what you wanted nailed down, and you're looking to go beyond that now. Weight class is also a discrete class, so you choose one item or the other. You can't really overlap. And this is more about the requirements for running the commons. So really pulling on human capacity. And it's considering the breadth of services and platforms and that human power needed to provide them. So some options for this were lightweight. So you do have services and you do have goals, but maybe you're mostly volunteer, or you've got part-time contributions, or you've only got in-kind contributions. You might not have dedicated employees. So again, I was thinking about the IVOA, and that's probably going to be the top one just because Francois has already brought it up. Middleweight would be kind of this in-between phase where you have a small team or a dedicated team. but you might not have any separate departments. It's like one team that's kind of operating everything. They have different titles more than likely, but you don't have whole departments running the whole infrastructure. And then a heavyweight would be that highest level. You've got a lot of diversified goals, you've got a lot of services, you've got a lot of full-time staff. You might even have dispersed staff or in-kind staff. You've got task groups, committees, different departments, the whole shebang. Service level is more about the services themselves as opposed to the human power to provide them. So this is more about what services have you developed and then you're offering as a part of your commons. So you own that completely. You run the software, you run the hardware, and you've got the people to power it. Versus what do you aggregate from the outside and provide access to your community? So are you running your own discovery layer? Like, did you create it yourself, or are you having a discovery layer provided by a third party or from a generic global provider? That sort of question. And so this service level of like how much is offered in-house versus how much is offered an aggregate is defining service level, and that likewise is a discrete value. They don't overlap. So dispersed would be you don't offer a lot of your own services, but you provide access to services. And that might be a lot of access or only to a few services. It's not really talking about weight class there. It's very much how much do you offer in-house. So dispersed would be you don't offer a lot in-house, but you might offer access to lots of things externally. Collected is that balance. So you offer some things in-house, you offer some things externally. So you don't do everything yourselves, but you provide access to it. So that's collected. Centralized would be you host or provide almost all of the services provided in-house. So very few things are pulled on from external. You have everything handled within your own infrastructure. Last couple here, reach. So this is a spectrum and it's multifaceted. So you can actually choose more than one as part of your reach. And this is kind of talking about who your intended user base is. It might not reflect who the actual user base is, but your intended one. And so this one focuses on whether it's domain specific or agnostic. So it's a kind of a Boolean, you're domain specific or you're not. You can be national. So you're serving the needs of a nation. So this kind of, again, leads into this National Data Services interest group, and we presented on it in that session as well. And then the other option is pan-national. So you can't be national and pan-national at the same time, but you can be domain-specific and national or domain-specific and pan-national. And that's why we're calling this one kind of a spectrum or multiple facets that can come together. And lastly would be approach. This one is about how are you going about delivering these services, regardless of the service level or weight class you have. Are you developing a culture of open science and open research in your community first through training, through workshops, through presentations, through policy changes? Or are you approaching infrastructure first and developing all of your compute hardware and getting it all built and the servers up and running before or even at the same time that you do training? And so this one is likewise a spectrum. You can have two facets which can overlap. Infrastructure first, Cardi already talked about that. You're focusing on the actual building of the stuff. Or community first, you're focusing on building the community capacity. So you can be both infrastructure focused and community focused. You are approaching both at the same time. The reason why this came up is because we did find a number of commons that were community focused primarily. They had not started building their infrastructure. They were focused very much on building the culture of open science and open research in their communities first. So that was really interesting. Okay, so that's the definitions. Big walls of text, I know. How does this look like in practice? What does this mean? So I want to show you some examples from the speaker series. And again, the speaker series has not been vetted by the speakers themselves. This is not a complete analysis. It is my interpretation and is very much subject to change, especially as these comments have developed over the last 2 years since the speaker series occurred. I do have the full speaker series details linked in the slide, and we have a 3D model as well as a full text analysis to accompany it. So there's lots of content to dive into here. I'm just showing you some snapshots. But the main thing as we go into each one is that because these are dimensions, the actual type is when you have a value in each dimension. So for example, and I actually prefer showing the 3D model, this is what it looks like. We're going to use IBICT because Laturo has already seen this. But for IBICT, for example, they have their own type currently. They are a mature commons. They're a heavyweight commons that is collected. So they have both things that are in-house as well as external. They have a lot of staff. and they've been around for a while. They have quite a number of established services, and still looking to expand and develop, of course, but not at that same level as a middle-aged or young commons would be. They're also national, so they're not domain specific and national, but they're very much a national commons. And they have a circle as their shape. So here they are community and infrastructure focused. I did find lots of instances of them offering training and courses for their community. And of course, they build their own infrastructure for that collected service level. And so what we're seeing here is that even though I don't have multiple commons laid on top of them, we only had 12 speakers, so it's not a lot of data points. IBICT represents a type of commons by having a value in each of these dimensions. So the commons type here would be mature, heavyweight, collected, national, community, and infrastructure focused. And I know that's a lot, but I think that the way that I created these dimensions was intended to showcase that you can't nail down types in a short format. It's kind of a combination of things that are up to the context of what's happening in that particular instance. I'll also use IVOA as an example, just because we've been talking about them a lot, and they're very different. They're mature. I don't think anyone can argue that one. But they're a lightweight commons and very dispersed. They are, in fact, pan-national and domain-specific, focusing on the astronomy community at an international level. And I kind of listed them as community and infrastructure, kind of taking like a very liberal interpretation of infrastructure here to imply standards. And there were some training and help with the community that was offered there. So that's another example. So I encourage you to, look through the 3D model. We had almost everything in every quadrant. Finding something in the centralized service level was difficult because most commons do a lot of aggregate from readily available services, but CST Cloud is an example of a centralized as well as NAI ARCOS. So they do a lot of in-house stuff. A lot of their services are developed in-house. That was the example there. Okay, so with that, kind of showcasing that piece, I want to break out a discussion on these commons types. This is our first deliverable. What do you feel about it? These are some sample questions, but I'm happy for us to have a general discussion. Francois.
Yes, I was chatting in the chat about that. I understand. I asked before you began to explain. I asked whether you used the speakers series to propose these dimensions, and Andrew answered that yes, but this was not tested by the speakers with the speakers. So my impression is that it would be interesting to ask the speakers to say where they think they are, and this may help to work on the definitions.
Okay. So like provide them the definitions and the options that we've kind of
Yes.
identified and say, how do you feel you fit here?
Yes,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
do you have comment? Are there things you don't know where you are? Because you
Mhm.
need to put each comment somewhere. And if people are here asking themselves, where am I? You have to think about the dimension, because there may be something lacking if you have a discrete description, discrete possibilities, and so on.
Mhm. I really like the proposal, Francois, and maybe we can think about as the working group starts, if we want to do, maybe that's too much to ask at one time. Like if we wanted to ask about the commons types that they feel they're in, as well as vet their profiles at the same time, but maybe we'll send just two different asks at different times. That might be better. But no, I really like that. Thank you.
Maybe a comment on my side, it's that by combining several of these dimensions, new dimensions can emerge. Let me give you an example. You can have a very central commons, according to your definition, that connects or that is part of a bigger federated commons. That is a bit the approach of the system of systems that we are trying to pursue in EOSC, which is about interconnected, well-established commons they can be thematic, they can be national, they can fall a little bit in all the different dimensions that you described, mature enough in principle because of the ambition of the quality of services. But you can have a very central one that federates or distributes or that gets interconnected with others, and therefore you become a node in a bigger network, and therefore you belong to two. You have a meaning as an individual central thing with your falling in whichever dimensions you fall, but you form part of a bigger thing. I mean, this is just an example. So some of these dimensions are composable, I think.
DJ, I have a particular comment on the service level value, dispersed, collected, or centralized. I would suggest to have or consider or discuss the decentralized option, which is different from dispersed, and especially we are discussing and building decentralized services in our region. So maybe it could be a way to express that option of having a service which is decentralized, which is different from dispersed, and it's a service that acts on as a central service, but the implementation of the service is decentralized. I don't know if.
Oh, okay. So that's getting more into. I see what you mean. I see what you mean, like a decentralized approach to implementing a service, even though it's provided in-house. Okay.
Actually, we are building that kind of service for persistent identifiers implemented on top of decentralized technologies.
Mhm.
So that's an example of something that is not maybe represented with these categories, because it's not dispersed, it's not centralized.
My only concern is that we don't want to mix up areas of the model with commons types. This is supposed to kind of lie on top of it and describe how a commons is operating as a whole. So it's not talking about the method in which you would enact a specific service, which very much I agree is you can enact services and tools in a decentralized fashion.
Okay.
But I would
Okay.
be, but like, do you see what I mean? So you are still
Yeah.
as that commons, like creating and providing that service in-house, like you're developing your own software for it, or you're doing all the management for it, the coordination for it, which would hint more towards centralized, even though keep in mind this is how it's supposed to work. Someone might say, this commons has is centralized as a part of the service level, but when they go into it, how you would describe your services within the model, you would say the services are implemented in a decentralized fashion, which is not so much the commons in its own right, but how you would implement your services. So yeah, we want to be just careful on mixing those concepts, but that's a really good point. We want to be careful for that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think
CJ,
that I understood the point. I agree.
sorry, we have 5 minutes to go, just to let you know.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Francois.
Yes, I have a similar comment about lightweight, because in IVOA there are many people who participate. So I think we have to be sure. It has to do with what you just said. So you will have to say it's overarching characteristics dealing with the way things are organized and not who is working and so on. So this is the kind of comment which we can make when we check our own case, I guess.
Yeah, that is going to be helpful. And so there is also this whole thing of like, maybe these dimensions aren't right in the first place. Maybe weight class needs to refer to the people that are actually doing the work more so than the overarching workforce. But okay, because we are running out of time and I want to give Latero the time to wrap us up. I want to thank folks I see the chat is going, and so please feel free to also go into the collaborative notes and leave comments. In there, we've got cells for the overarching dimensions as well as their individual choices within them. I'm hoping we can continue this conversation, and because we want this deliverable to be one of the first things we do in this group to then kind of lay the groundwork for developing profiles and the rest of it. We are aiming to have this done within the next month or so. So we're going to take all the feedback today, and we're going to think about it some more, especially the recommendation from Francoise on reaching out to our speaker series and saying, how would you define yourself, and then we can see how that reflects. But we do want this to be done pretty quickly, so we will be picking this up in our May meeting as well. So keep an eye out for that. All right, so we're gonna skip all the way to next steps and conclusion. Lautaro, take us out.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think that we throw a lot of things for this session, and we focus it on bringing people. I think that's the main message here, that we need help. The model, the model 1.1 it's out, and we want and we need help to work on the deliverables. And as you saw, we need more representation from different parts of the world. So we need your help to bring other people to make these implementations and the different groups more diverse. It's important to the collaboration with the other groups. So we are working on in that sense. And so I think that the main message is, and even for the people, the new people coming, don't get the idea that it's too complex. I know there's a lot of information. Again, I'm still learning, but I do think that this model, this is the way to do it, to represent the commons in the different parts of the world. There are a lot of people working in different parts of the world in the very same things. If we have a common model and a common way to name the things, to analyze and to think together, a mental model to exchange and collaborate, I think that this is the way. We think that this is the way. We are collaborating for that. So we will appreciate very much your help, and please sign in the groups, join and discuss and bring your ideas, and also apply this model to your realities. We need more application profiles and even to test the model and see if we need to work more to make it more representative. So you are very welcome to participate. That's at least my message, and I think that is the message of all the chairs. So thank you. Please,
Andrew, Javier, anything to add? Claps from Javier.
Yeah, I was just clapping. I fully agree with what Lautaro just said.
I have nothing to add to Lautaro's stirring call for action.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you folks for coming to the session. Reminder, as Lautaro said, to sign up for those task groups and working groups, fill out some comments on the collaborative notes, and we hope to see you in May once we set our meeting time and send out that reminder.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, CJ.
for
Thanks,
joining.
everybody.
So, bye-bye.
Thanks all for joining.
Hello.